Okay, so now we move to the last but not least talk. The speaker is Biao, and so he works on machine translation, especially towards efficient universal neural machine translation during his PhD study. And he obtained his doctoral degree at the University of Edinburgh this spring. And he was supervised by Rico, and he's joining Google Zone. And today he will give us a talk on cross-lingual and cross-modality modeling for context-aware machine translation. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Okay, can you see my screen? Is it
Yes.
okay? Okay, cool. Okay, so thanks Gumbo for the introduction, and hi everyone, I'm Biao Zhang from the University of Edinburgh. So in the last talk, let's talk about something else, about cross-lingual learning and also cross-modality modeling for context-aware machine translation. So I think in previous talks we have discussed the necessity of incorporating context into machine translation. And below I give two more examples. So in the first example, this is given by Google Translate, and it's translation from Turkish to English. And you can see that the pronoun in Turkish can translate into either he or she. And if you don't have any context, and you will have no idea which one would be the preferred. And also, we also discussed the human party thing back to 2018. But it turns out that this is kind of evaluation issue. So if you evaluate your model at the document level, and you will find that the neural machine translation performs much worse than human translation. So this inspires researchers to explore document level neural machine translation to incorporate the context. And there are many architectures, algorithms, dataset, evaluation methods are proposed. So from the modeling perspective, we have like hierarchical models, multi-source models, and so on. And in our study, we mainly focused on the concatenation-based model, as shown in this picture. The idea is that we concatenate the previous source and future source context, or basically the neighboring sequences into one trunk and perform the trunk-to-trunk translation directly. Well, this is a very simple method, but it turns out it can produce very competitive performance based on some recent studies. And it's also highly flexible to study cross-lingual transfer and also to study multimodality modeling. Let's first revisit the current recipe for DocMT. So the firstly, we usually assume the availability of large-scale document-level data. So because we know MT is data hungry and it requires many data to reach decent performance. And secondly, we often focus on text-to-text translation because this is the most classical setup to study machine translation. But we argue that there are several problems behind this recipe. For the first point, we argue that many languages in the world suffer from data scarcity, and we have limited sentence level data. We also have very limited document level data. So what if we don't have document data for the language pairs we focused on? And regarding the second point, we want to emphasize that translation is not limited to text. And there are many application scenarios demanding us to study multimodality modeling for translation, like speech-to-text translation. And the discourse-related translation problem is also not limited to textual MT. So for example, in speech-to-text translation, and here I showed an example given by Google Translate, and its translation between Chinese and English, and it highlights some problems with the translation of homophones. So here it's not a text-to-text translation, but instead it is a speech-to-text translation. The input is an audio and the output is a text. The problem is that, for example, in Chinese, as I said during the panel discussion, and the pronouns for it, her, and him here sound exactly the same in the audio. But the model can only produce one. If we don't give any background, it might just randomly pick one. And also, like if I say I like flower, and you might have no idea which flower I actually mean, the cooking flower or the bloom flower. So in such kind of cases, the context might offer some informative clues that help the model to figure out which one would be preferred and which one is the correct one. There are two open research questions I want to explore in this presentation. The first question is how to achieve doc-MT for document plural languages. And we address this problem in our this year's ACL publication. Multilingual document-level neural machine translation enables zero-shot transfer from sentences to documents. And this is a collaboration with Ankur, Marvin, Ali, Navin, and Orhan from Google Research. So we took inspiration from multilingual sentence-level AMT, and we argue that the cross-lingual transfer might be the rescue. So let's think about the sentence-level multilingual neural machine translation. So the sentence-level resources are also unevenly distributed across languages. And there are some languages which is high results have plenty sentence-level training data, but there are also some languages with very few, very limited training data. But by jointly training one single model for all these languages, and we could greatly improve low-resource translation and even enable zero-shot translation. So we ask a question, or we are wondering, can we also transfer the contextual modeling ability from document-rich languages to document-plural languages via multilingual modeling? And here is a high-level illustration for our focused problem. We split our languages into two sets. One we call the teacher, which are document-rich languages. Another one is student, which are document-plural languages. And we assume that for all of them, we have sentence pairs. So we could first pre-train a multilingual SynNLP model and tell the model how to do translation for these languages, at least at the sentence level. And next, we only assume that the teachers have document pairs, but for students, we have no document data at all. The idea is that by fine-tuning a multilingual SynNLP model on the mix of document data from teachers and sentence data from students, so we want to study whether we could generalize a multilingual SynNLP model to a multilingual document model, and whether we could transfer the contextual modeling ability from teachers to students in a zero-shot way. By zero-shot, we mean that here we don't use document pairs or document data for the student languages. And there are many aspects that could affect the transfer result. And in our study, we mainly explored three of them. The first one is the number of teachers. So intuitively, if we have more teachers, we will have more knowledge sources for the transfer. And ideally, we will get better performance. And we mainly studied two setups, one-to-N transfer and N-to-1 transfer, where we either just have one teacher or we just have one student. And these are two extreme cases. We hope they could offer some insights for the information in the middle. The second aspect is the proportion of document data during fine-tuning. So during fine-tuning, we mix document data and sentence level data. This might have some impact on the transfer, because if we schedule too few access to the document data, then the model might not be able to learn any meaningful contextual modeling ability, so the transfer would be very limited. So in experiments, we will control the proportion P and study how it affects the translation results. And finally, we have a setup where we assume what if we just have monolingual documents in teachers? And follow the previous studies, we use back translation to back translate the monolingual documents and construct pseudo-parallel documents. But apparently, this data will be of low quality. So basically, we want to study whether we can learn something meaningful from the low quality document pairs. So for experiments, we use the transform-based model, and we work with doc-MT, which can candidate 5 neighboring sentences to do the translation. And one more thing we explore is the model inference. We studied the 2 types of inference, SynInfer and doc-infer. By SynInfer, we mean we use a model to translate sentences individually. So this is just like sentence level translation. Well, doc-infer means that we translate neighboring sentences together, which is like document translation. And we will compare, there will be some interesting findings behind such kind of inference that might offer some insight for future work. I will discuss this later. And for the data set, we work on Europe 7, which is an English-centric data with 7 languages from Europe. And we separately study one-to-many translation and many-to-one translation to simplify our setup. Evaluation, apparently here, evaluation is a big problem. If you think about the multilingual setup, you will think about multiple language pairs. And how to do evaluation for all of them, I think is still a ongoing direction. And we don't have a perfect solution here, but the idea behind our setup is that we try to include as many evaluation metrics as possible to cover different aspects for the translation. So in general, we adopt 3 types of evaluation method: general evaluation, document-specific evaluation, and human evaluation. For general evaluation, we use document level BLEU, which calculates BLEU by comparing document pairs rather than sentence pairs. And for document-specific evaluation metrics, for English to XX translation, and we use the contrastive test set available for English to German and English to French. And for translation into English, we use the pronoun Inference score. And we particularly focused on gender pronoun here, like he, she, and their variants. And finally, we also include a human evaluation. We will ask the human readers to take context in mind when they read the sentences. So let's check out the result. In this plot, it's for N-to-1 transfer and for one-to-many translation. And we report relative performance compared to the baseline. So if you look at the y-axis, and the baseline means the result for 0 here. The x-axis for each plot means the proportion P, basically the proportion of document data when you're fine-tuning the model. And from left to right, we have a result for different metrics. The first one is BLEU, and next one is accuracy score for English to German and accuracy score for English to French. We show the 2 systems. The baseline system is shown by the red dashed curve, and our transfer model is shown by this blue curve, and it's for doc inference. So you can see that the data balance, it greatly affects the translation performance. And by properly scheduling this proportion, and we can achieve better performance in terms of BLEU. And if you look at the accuracy scores on the contrastive test set, for example, here on English to German and English to French, the improvement is very, very significant. And we can get like 8 or even 10 points, 10-point improvement than the baselines. So from this result, we can say that contextual modeling is transferable by multilingual modeling. And here we study how the number of teachers impact the performance, and we compare N-to-N transfer given in by the blue curves and one-to-N transfer given by the blue curves. So if you compare the blue curves and the green curves, you will find that the blue curves almost always outperforms the green one, and that means the N-to-N transfer almost delivers better performance in different setups. But this makes sense because it tells that using more teachers is often more useful or more helpful to the transfer. And here is the result for translation into English, and the result is similar. And by properly scheduling the hyperparameter P, we can get improved performance in terms of BLEU, and the document-specific evaluation metrics. The improvement for document-specific evaluation metrics is much significant. So what if we use such kind of low quality parallel data with back translation? And can we get positive transfer from that? We find the answer is yes. And here we show the result for one-to-many translation on the top and many-to-one translation on the bottom. Particularly if you look at the red column result, this is for document-specific evaluation metrics. The top one is the accuracy score on English to French or English to German. And the bottom one is for pronoun Inference score. You can find that we can get very high improvement compared to the baseline. And also, if you look at the human evaluation in the first column, our N-to-N transfer model achieves a higher human evaluation score compared to the multilingual thin-empty model. So this means that by using sufficient teachers and proper data schedule and also good data condition, we can enable very high quality zero-shot transfer. But here we want to have some discussion about the evaluation. So we found that the evaluation might be broken. This is a result for the accuracy scores on English to French. And here is the system for thin-empty but with doc inference, which means our model is trained at the sentence level. but we do the scoring with concatenated sentences. We found that even though the model is not explicitly trained to leverage context, it delivers much higher accuracy scores compared to the thin inference. This might have two implications. Firstly, because the English to French contrastive test set is very small, it just contains like 100 or 200 samples. So the evaluation might be not that reliable or stable. And this might suggest that we need more large-scale contrastive test set for evaluation. And another implication might be, although the thin empty model is not trained to leverage context, in our training data, and sometimes we have the samples that contains multiple sentences. So maybe the model already learned some sort of contextual modeling, although we use sentence level training. Then another finding, also very interesting finding, is that what if we use Docker empty model, but to use it with thin inference? So we use the Docker empty model, but we translate the sentences individually. We don't translate a concatenated sentence, we just translate the sentence by sentence. And in this way, we never give the model the context, but we found that the human raters give a much higher score to this setup. Well, we still have no idea where would what this could tell us, but it might suggest that firstly, the human evaluation might have some problem, because although we suggest that the annotators, the readers, to take context into consideration, but in practice, this is not guaranteed. So there might be some problem, or maybe there's some modeling problem. So even though we use the concatenated sequence for contextual modeling, the model might not really learn to use context, but instead maybe there are some regularization effect or maybe some other effect that give us some sort of improvement. So here I believe that we need more, we need further study and could inspire some sort of future work. The second question is whether and how context helps speech to text translation. And we answered this question in our last year's ACL publication, Beyond the Sentence Level End-to-End Speech Translation, Context Helps. And this is the collaboration with Ivan, Barry, and Rico. So why should we study context for speech translation? Where we talked about the discourse-related translation problems and also discussed the homophone problems. But for speech translation, another very practical setup is to do simultaneously translation, where the model learns to translate incomplete segments. So apart from the other benefit, and context might offer some extra clues, such as the background and the topic of the talk, and maybe the speaker style to help to translate incomplete segments. And there are many challenges for contextual modeling for speech translation. For example, from modeling perspective, we talked about lexical cohesion in previous talks, where so one problem is that even though there's the same phrase which occurs in different sentences, the model might translate into different outputs. Well, this problem will be much harder in speech translation. So think about it. In text translation, the same phrases will always have the same representation at the embedding level. But this is always not the true for speech translation, because at the acoustic level, the representation for the same phrases are always different. It depends on the speaker's emotion, tone, and many, many things. And this will make the modeling much, much difficult. And whether the model could capture useful signals from context is still questionable. Another problem is the computational barrier, because speech representation is often much, much longer than its transcript. Like in our data set, it's on average about 8 times longer. So if you combine multiple segments into one chunk to do speech translation, to do the contextual modeling, you might not be able to fit your samples into a GPU for the training. And finally, it's about evaluation. It turns out that there are very, very limited study on how to perform document level evaluation for speech translation. And in our project, we will discuss some sort of method we use, some automatic method we use, but it's still not a perfect solution. And here, I believe we will need more effort. So for the modeling, we still use the concatenated method for contextual modeling, but we leverage the adaptive feature selection method proposed in EMRP 2020, which can automatically filter out some uninformative speech signals and only retain about 15% of speeches to do the translation job, and could give us even better performance. And by using only 50% of features, and we can roughly match the length of its transcript, so we could train the concatenated systems. For evaluation, and apart from blue scores, we add some evaluation for pronoun translation and also homophone translation. So we use the APT framework. As we said, it relies on automatic word alignment to compare the hypotheses and the references. And in our study, we focused on all the English personal pronouns. And for the homophone translation, we first extract the phonemes of the transcript, and we collect the words which have the same phoneme sequences for this evaluation. And we reuse the APT framework to evaluate the homophone translation. So here is the result on must say English to German and with transform base model using 3-to-3 architecture. So you can say that by using contextual modeling, the context-aware ST outperformed the baseline on almost all the evaluation metrics. But note that we found that although we also get some improvement for pronoun and homophone translation, the improvement is not that impressive compared to, for example, the result on the contrastive test set. And it still remain in the relative range for blue score improvement. Then let's see some translation examples. The first example here is for pronoun translation. You can see that for the source word 8, when you translate it into German, and you could have different forms, basically 3 candidates, but with different gender information, either in neutral form or masculine form or feminine form. But for the baseline, because there's no extra information, and it either randomly output a translation, or it maybe reflects some sort of bias of the model or the training data. But using context, you can see that the context could help to fix this problem. And in the second example, it's not a purely homophone translation, but a near homophone translation. It's very interesting. You can see that the source input is under Pons, but the baseline translated into under Japan. Maybe there are some sounds similar between Japan and Pons. Somehow the model made some mistake. And the contextual modeling here helps a little bit. But translating homophone is still very challenging. Here I showed an example. So the source sentence means I sell pet toys all over the country. But the baseline translated into I saw patent toilets over the country. It's very interesting. This is actually a very hard example. And even for the contextual modeling, the context-aware ST system did a very, very bad job. So we did some manual analysis regarding this problem. We found that many homophones can be translated pretty well. For example, I or for the preposition for or number for, because they have different usage. They often have different context. So if you can train a good language model, you will be very likely to produce a correct output. However, we found some other cases, like shown in this example. It's pretty hard. So even though the model understands it like I saw pet toys all over the country, it makes some sense based on this context. So it's still very challenging to study whether the model can really use context to help this problem. And also, it's very hard to say in theory whether the context could be helpful. And here, I believe it will deserve further study. So another perspective is about simultaneous retranslation. And we adopt the retranslation strategy for simultaneous translation. And we found that the context-aware ST can help improve the translation performance and also reduce the latency and reduce the flicker. So basically, in general, it benefits the simultaneous translation for speech setups. So to summarize, in this talk, I showed that some studies about cross-lingual modeling and cross-modality modeling for context-aware translation. And we show that contextual modeling capability is transferable by using multilingual modeling, and we can transfer the contextual knowledge from document-rich languages to document-poor languages in a very short way. And we also show that contextual modeling can benefit speech-to-text translation. It can improve pronoun translation, homophone translation, and simultaneous translation with a varying degree. But we also found that evaluation is a very important topic, and it's still very challenging, particularly if you think about massive multilingual translation and also multimodality modeling. And apparently, we need more effort to figure out a better evaluation method for these more broad setups. And also, there are a lot of results I didn't show in this slide. If you have interest, please check out our paper. That's all today. Thanks.
Thanks for your fresh and inspiring talk. So, any questions from the audience? So I have a curiosity question. So I'm wondering that is there any kind of a special contextual features that only existed in the speech but not in text?
I think in general, so let's answer this question in two aspects. Firstly, there are some information. For example, when a male and female speak, they might have different, types of audios. So that might give some information about the speaker that could help the translation. This is one part. But on the other hand, it will be much harder because the speech is more has more noises and increased uncertainty when you do the modeling. So compared to text translation, even let's just compare to the text translation, even though you find some signals that are helpful for text-based translation, the model might not be able to capture that signal from audios. So it will make it much harder.
Okay, so in general, the speech translation is more challenging than the text translation, right?
Yes, yes. If you look at the output, you will find a lot of interesting problems. Just like the example I showing, like the model translated into "I saw a patent toilet." you don't know why the model delivers such kind of output and how it could misunderstand in such a way. So it's more challenging. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting.
I mean, it's also interesting that, I mean, a human would rule out this reading for common sense reasons, quite simply. I mean, even if it's acoustically exactly the same, you just wouldn't interpret it that way because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, for the computer, I mean, how can it know what makes sense? Yeah. I don't have any specific question. I saw your talk at ACL and found it very interesting. I fully agree with your bolded point on the second to last slide. Yeah, very nice work.
Thanks.
Okay, I mean, I guess if we don't have any more questions from the audience, then we have reached the end of this workshop. Thank you very much, Biao, for your last talk. Thank you very much, everybody else, for being here. I really enjoyed this day. We had a lot of interesting talks and discussions. Thanks, Gongo, for organizing this together with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.